My dad spent 15 years tending to the tree in our backyard. I just cut it down, and I don't think it was a tree. I don't know where else to turn. I can't talk to my mom about this. She's already a wreck. I can't talk to my dad because, well, he's the reason I'm writing this. I did something, and I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was saving him. But now the house is filled with a silence that is so much worse than the screaming I wish I could hear. And I see the look in my father's eyes, and I know I've made a terrible, terrible mistake. I need help. I need someone to tell. I need to do. We live in a nice house, the kind of place people move to when they want a family. A big yard, a picket fence, flower beds my mom fusses over. It was a normal, happy place to grow up, until the tree. It all started about 15 years ago. I was 10. My dad came home from work one day, absolutely buzzing with an energy I'd rarely seen. He was a quiet man, a decent man, worked a steady job in logistics, and his passions were small and manageable. He loved gardening. It was his escape. On this day, he was holding a small, wrinkled paper bag. "Look at this," he said, his eyes shining as he showed me a single gnarled black seed. It was the size of a pigeon's egg, strangely heavy, and covered in faint spiral patterns. Got it from a street vendor downtown, an old fella. Said it was special. Said it would grow into a great tree, a king in our yard. Said it would cast its shadow over the whole house and protect us. I was 10. I thought it was cool. My dad was a sane, rational man, but he always got a bit poetic when he talked about his garden. I just figured he was exaggerating to make his only kid excited. We planted it together in the center of the backyard. It was a good memory. One of the last purely good ones, I think. The tree grew, and it grew fast. Faster than any tree has a right to grow. Within a couple of years, it was already taller than me. My dad was ecstatic. He tended to it like it was some kind of deity. He built a small, neat wooden fence around its base. Not to keep animals out, but, it seemed, to designate its space as sacred. No one else was allowed to water it. No one else was allowed to prune it, not that it ever seemed to need it. It was his. For years, my mom and I just accepted it. It was Dad's hobby, his thing. When he was out in the yard, kneeling by the tree, we knew that was his time. We didn't interfere. We didn't think much of it. But the tree kept growing. And as it grew, my dad started to change. Subtly at first. He'd spend more and more time out there. He'd come in for dinner with dirt under his fingernails and a distant, peaceful look on his face. He started talking about the tree not as a plant, but as a presence. "The tree is well today," he'd say. "It enjoyed the rain." We'd just smile and nod. By the time I was in my early 20s, the tree was a monster. It was a species none of us recognized. Its bark was a smooth, dark gray, almost black, and its leaves were a deep, waxy green that seemed to drink the sunlight. It towered over our 2-story house, casting a vast, profound shadow over the entire backyard for most of the day. And that's when we really started to notice the wrongness. The first sign was the other plants. My mom's prize-winning roses, the vegetable patch, the cheerful little flowers she planted every spring, and anything that fell under the tree's shadow for more than a few hours a day would wither and die. The soil beneath it became barren, gray, and hard as rock. Then, the animals. Birds stopped nesting in our yard. The squirrels that used to chase each other across the lawn vanished. Even our family dog, a golden retriever, would refuse to go into the backyard. He'd stand at the back door, whining, his tail tucked between his legs, refusing to set a single paw in the shadow. But the worst change was in my father. His obsession became his entire existence. He quit his job. He said he needed to be home to attend to the tree. He'd spend all day, from sunrise to sunset, sitting on a small bench he'd built directly under its densest branches. He just sat there. Sometimes, we'd see him from the kitchen window, his head tilted as if he were listening to something. Sometimes, his lips would move, and we knew, with a certainty that made us sick, that he was talking to it. My mom and I tried to reach him. We pleaded. We begged. "Honey, please," my mom would say, her voice breaking. "Come inside. Eat something. You look so thin." He'd just shake his head, a slow, placid smile on his face. I'm not hungry. The shadow is enough. It's so peaceful here. It comforts me. It can comfort you too if you just come and sit with me. We never did. There was something about that shadow. It wasn't just a lack of light. It felt cold. It felt heavy. It felt hungry. Standing at the edge of it felt like standing at the shore of a deep, dark ocean. You knew you shouldn't step in. The last weeks were the breaking point. He stopped coming inside at all, except to sleep in his chair in the living room for a few fitful hours. He was wasting away. His skin was pale and waxy, his eyes were sunken, but they held a serene, the vacant glow that terrified me more than any anger could have. He was being consumed. The tree was eating him alive, and he was letting it. I decided I had to do something. I had to save him. The tree had to go. I waited until night. I watched through the window until he finally reluctantly came inside and slumped into his armchair, falling into his usual restless sleep. The house was silent. My mom was asleep upstairs. This was my chance. I grabbed the heavy wood-splitting axe from the garage. My hands were sweating, my heart pounding a frantic, terrified rhythm against my ribs. I stepped out the back door. The yard was bathed in the pale, ethereal light of a full moon, but the ground beneath the tree was a pit of absolute blackness. I stepped into the shadow. The cold was immediate, shocking. It wasn't a natural cold. It was a deep, draining cold that seemed to pull the warmth directly from my bones. I walked to the base of the tree. Its smooth, black bark felt strangely slick to the touch, almost like skin. I raised the axe. As the metal head touched the bark, I heard it. A whisper, right beside my ear. A voice that was both male and female, old and young. It was a rustle of like leaves and a sigh of wind and a voice, all at once. Don't. I stumbled back, my heart seizing in my chest. I looked around wildly. The yard was empty. I had to have imagined it. It was the wind. It was my own fear talking back to me. It had to be. I steeled myself, spat on my hands, and swung the axe with all my might. TF whack. The sound was dull, wet, not the sharp crack of axe on wood I was expecting. It felt like hitting a side of beef. The axe bit deep into the trunk. I wrenched it free, and a dark liquid, black in the moonlight, began to ooze from the gash. I ignored it. I swung again, and again, and again. I fell into a frantic, desperate rhythm, sweat pouring down my face, my muscles screaming. The wet, fleshy thud of the axe, the splatter of the dark sap, the deep, draining cold of the shadow. It was a nightmare. With every swing, the ooze from the gash flowed more freely. The coppery, metallic smell of it filled the air. It was a smell I knew, a smell that had no business being here. It was the smell of blood. I touched the sticky liquid with my fingers, brought them to my nose. It was blood. Thick, dark, real blood. Panic, stark and absolute, seized me. I wanted to run. I wanted to drop the axe and flee and never look back. But then I thought of my father, of his vacant, smiling face, of him wasting away on his bench. I couldn't stop. I had to finish it. I screamed, a raw, wordless sound of rage and fear, and I put everything I had into the last few swings. The gash widened. The tree groaned, a deep, shuddering sound that seemed to shake the very ground. And then, with a final tearing shriek of splintering matter, it fell. It crashed into the yard with a ground-shaking boom, its great branches shattering my mom's empty flower pots. Silence. The shadow was gone. I was panting, leaning on the axe, my body trembling with exhaustion and adrenaline. My eyes were drawn to the stump, to the place where I had cut it. I pulled the small flashlight from my back pocket and aimed the beam at the wound. The inside of the tree wasn't wood. It was a chaotic, fibrous mass of what looked like dark red muscle and pale, glistening sinew, all woven around a central, horrifying core. Where I had cut the tree in half, I had also cut it in half. Embedded in the center of the trunk, integrated into its very being, was the torso of a human being. I could see the curve of the ribcage, the shape of the spine, the pale, rubbery look of preserved flesh. I had cut it clean through. The dark blood was still pouring from it, soaking into the ground. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. My mind simply stopped. What was this? Who was this? Was this what my father had been talking to? Burn it. The voice came from behind me. It was quiet, raspy, and broken. I spun around, my flashlight beam cutting wildly through the darkness. My father was standing at the edge of the patio. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at the fallen tree, at the mangled, bleeding stump. And the expression on his face, it was the most profound, gut-wrenching sadness I have ever witnessed. The vacant serenity was gone, replaced by a grief so deep it looked like it had cracked his very soul. "Dad?" I whispered. "We have to burn it," he repeated, his voice hollow. "All of it. Now." We worked together in a grim, silent ritual. We hacked the branches and the great trunk into manageable pieces. We dragged them into a pile in the center of the yard. My father moved like an old man, his newfound clarity costing him all his strength. He never once looked at the horrifying thing at the heart of the trunk. We doused the pile in gasoline, and my father threw the match. The fire went up with a roar, a greasy black smoke that smelled of burning meat, and something else, something acrid and deeply wrong. We stood there for hours, watching it burn until the great tree that had dominated our lives was nothing but a pile of glowing embers and a scorched black circle on the lawn. I thought I had saved him. I thought I had cut out the cancer that was killing him. But I was wrong. It's been a week. The tree is gone. The shadow is gone. My father, he's inside. He eats what my mom puts in front of him. He sleeps in his own bed. He's physically present. But he's not here. The obsession is gone, but the peace, twisted as it was, is gone too. It's been replaced by a constant humming anxiety. He paces the house. He stares out the window at the empty space in the yard. He jumps at every unexpected sound. He doesn't speak. Not a single word since that night. He just looks at me sometimes with those haunted, broken eyes, and I feel like I'm the monster. I destroyed the thing that was consuming him, and in doing so, I seem to have destroyed him too. I traded a smiling zombie for a silent, terrified ghost. What was that thing? What did I do? And how do I fix my dad? Is there any way to bring him back from whatever edge I pushed him over? Please, if anyone has any idea what happened here, tell me. The silence in this house is getting louder every day.
I clicked on a Reddit post I shouldn't have. Now I'm not sure this world is real. Disclaimer. I don't suffer from any diagnosed mental illness. I don't use drugs or alcohol. At the time of the events, I wasn't under stress or emotional strain. I've never told anyone this story. Maybe I was scared. Maybe I didn't want to sound crazy. Not even my girlfriend knows. It was just a regular Saturday in 2022. I woke up at 9 a.m., same as always. Got out of bed, kissed my girlfriend in the kitchen, took a shower, had breakfast. On Saturdays, I like to spend my free time on the computer gaming, random forums, Reddit, YouTube, digital wandering. That day I stumbled upon a subreddit discussing the theory that reality is just a simulation. I smirked and left a few sarcastic comments. Conspiracy theorists usually ignore replies, but this time someone responded. I don't remember the username or what they had written, just that it sounded ridiculous. But they replied, "What if I gave you concrete proof this isn't just a conspiracy?" I hesitated. Part of me thought it was a joke, but another part was curious. So I replied jokingly, "All right, take me down the rabbit hole." Not even 10 seconds later, they replied, "Check your email." My blood ran cold. I never linked my email to Reddit. I used throwaway accounts, fake names, no real info. But when I opened my inbox, there was one unread message, no sender, just the subject line. "This is the first proof." Inside was a video file, an MP4 a few seconds long. It showed my kitchen that morning, me entering, kissing my girlfriend, pouring coffee. Same shirt, same everything. But the camera angle, we didn't have any device in that spot. It looked like it was filmed from inside the wall, like someone or something was watching me. I ran to the kitchen. My girlfriend was there, casually scrolling TikTok. "Hey babe, you okay?" she asked. I nodded, but I wasn't. I rushed back to my PC. The Reddit chat, gone. Message deleted, profile non-existent. But the email was still there. And now there was a second one. Still not convinced? Let's continue. That's when things got weird. The lighting in the apartment felt off. Too white, too perfect. I looked out the window. Nothing moved. No wind, no sound. Even the birds seemed frozen. "Do you hear that silence?" I asked. She replied with a flat tone. "What silence? Everything is as it should be." She kept scrolling TikTok, same video, same sound, on loop. I went to the bathroom, splashed water on my face, looked in the mirror. My reflection was delayed, just slightly, like the mirror had to load me, back to the PC. Reddit was blank, a single pinned post. No title, just an image, a screenshot of my face, confused, in front of the bathroom mirror, one comment below, "Second proof, are you ready?" and a link. I hesitated, then clicked. Black screen, red text. "Do you consent to exit the simulated reality?" 2 options, yeah, no. I waited, then clicked, yes. The screen went dark. The laptop shut down. I felt a pull, like fainting, then black. I woke up, not in my bed, in a metal chair, a dark room, no windows, but not pitch black. There was light, sort of, but no source. In front of me, a mirror. At least I think it was a mirror. It replayed my morning. The shower, the coffee. Then writing appeared on the other side. "That's you, in the real world." I stood up, knocked on the glass, screamed. Nothing happened. Then the walls began to glitch. Code streamed across them. Lines, symbols, one word repeated in the chaos. "Reboot." Then a countdown. "Reboot in 60 seconds." I ran to the mirror. My reflection changed. For the first time, it looked at me, spoke, mouth moved, no sound. But I read the lips. "You won't wake up until you choose to," and everything shut down. I woke up in bed, sweating, shaking. My girlfriend called from the kitchen. She kissed me. It was 9 a.m. Saturday, same as before. I went to my PC. It was on. Email tab open. New message. No sender, no timestamp. Just a single sentence. "Now do you believe?" Since then, nothing's felt real. Sometimes people around me repeat themselves. Same faces, same lines, like NPCs. Sometimes mirrors glitch. My reflection lags just a fraction of a second, like it's still buffering, and I keep wondering, did I see the truth? Did I really leave the simulation, or was it just a dream? I don't know what I saw, but I know this. Something isn't right. My family has a rite of passage where we drive down a specific highway. I just found my grandfather's journal, and now I know it's not a tradition, it's a curse. The men in my family have a tradition, a rite of passage, my dad called it. When a boy becomes a man, he takes a journey in my grandfather's car, a cross-country trip alone to connect with the past. My grandfather died before I was born, so for me it was supposed to be a way to connect with the man I never knew, a way to understand my roots. Now I think it was a test, and I don't know if I passed or failed. The car itself is a relic, a 1968 Ford Falcon, a heavy beast of seafoam, green steel and chrome. The inside smells of old vinyl, stale pipe tobacco, and something else. Something faintly metallic and sad, like old blood. There's no GPS, no Bluetooth, no screen of any kind. Just a rumbling engine, a steering wheel the size of a ship's helm, and an old AM/FM radio with a single crackling speaker in the dash. I set off 2 weeks ago, with a worn paper map unfolded on the passenger seat beside me. The first few days were incredible. Just me, the open road, and the ghosts of old rock and roll on the radio. It was the time for me to go through the road. Looking at the map, I saw it. A thin red line designated a state highway that cut a perfectly straight 200-mile slash through a vast, dark green patch of national forest. The turnoff was unassuming, just a faded green sign pointing down a 2-lane blacktop that was immediately swallowed by a canopy of ancient towering pine trees. The air grew cooler. The sunlight dimmed, filtered through the dense needles overhead. Within 10 minutes, I hadn't seen another car. The road was a lonely, empty ribbon unfurling into the wilderness. That's when the radio started acting up. At first, it was just static, the familiar hiss of a signal lost to distance and geography. But then, through the static, a voice crackled to life. It was a news anchor, his voice crisp and urgent, talking about naval blockades and tensions in Cuba. The broadcast lasted for about 30 seconds, then dissolved back into static. Weird. I twisted the dial, but all I got was more hissing. A few miles later, it happened again. A jingle, upbeat and cheerful, for a brand of soda I vaguely remembered my parents talking about, one that hadn't been on shelves since the 70s. I dismissed it as atmospheric bounce. I'd heard of it happening in remote areas, Radio waves from God knows where, trapped in the ionosphere, sometimes bouncing back down in just the right conditions. It was a strange atmospheric quirk, a cool story to tell later. But the broadcasts kept coming, and they started to change. They became more intimate. I heard the hushed, whispered conversation of two young lovers, their words full of nervous excitement. I heard a mother humming a lullaby, a gentle, wordless tune full of so much love it made my chest ache. I heard a heated argument between two men, their voices sharp and angry, though I couldn't make out the words. They weren't broadcasts anymore, they were something else. The feeling in the car shifted from curiosity to a low, humming unease. The road stretched on, empty and unchanging. Then up ahead I saw a building. It was an old, dilapidated diner, its sign faded and peeling, its windows boarded up. It looked like it had been abandoned for half a century. As I drove past, the radio erupted. It wasn't a voice this time. It was a cacophony of sound. The clatter of cutlery on ceramic plates, the sizzle of a grill, the low murmur of conversation, and over it all, the clear, cheerful voice of a waitress asking, "What'll it be, hun?" It was so real, so vibrant, I could almost smell the greasy spoon coffee. It lasted for the 10 seconds it took to pass the diner, and then it vanished, replaced by the familiar hiss of static. A few miles later, I passed a wide clearing with a single, massive, gnarled oak tree in the center. As the car drew level with it, the radio crackled again. This time it was the sound of children laughing, pure, unadulterated joy. And underneath it, the steady, rhythmic creak, creak, creak of a tire swing. I looked at the tree. There was no swing, just a thick, heavy branch, empty against the grey sky. The realization hit me hard. The radio wasn't picking up random signals from the sky. It was picking them up from the ground, from the road itself. It was playing back moments, memories that had happened in the exact locations I was passing. This entire desolate stretch of highway, it was a recording. And this car, my grandfather's car, was the playback device. A morbid curiosity, stronger than my fear, took hold. I started to experiment. I slowed the car to a crawl. I passed an old collapsed barn, its roof caved in, its timbers rotting. The radio filled with the frantic, desperate voice of a man praying, begging for mercy as the sound of a roaring thunderstorm raged around him. The storm wasn't real. The sky above me was a flat, overcast grey, but in the car I could almost feel the thunder shake my bones. I stopped the car completely. The prayer faded. I put it in reverse, backed up 10 feet. The prayer started again, mid-sentence. I was controlling it. I was scrubbing through the timeline of this place. The initial wonder of it began to curdle into something much darker. The memories weren't all picnics and laughter. They couldn't be. Up ahead, the road curved sharply around a deep, rocky ravine. A rusty, mangled section of guardrail was the only sign of trouble. As I approached, a knot of ice formed in my stomach. I almost turned the radio off. I couldn't. The static gave way to the screech of tires on wet pavement. It was a horrifying, high-pitched squeal of rubber losing its grip. It was followed by a single sharp female scream, a sound of pure, final terror, cut off abruptly by a sickening crunch of metal on rock, and then silence. A profound, heavy, listening silence that was worse than the scream itself. I felt physically cold. The dread wasn't just in my head anymore. It was a physical sensation seeping into me from the old vinyl of the seats, through the steering wheel into my hands. This wasn't just a recording. The emotions were real. The pain, the fear, the joy. They were imprinted here. I had to get out, just for a minute. I pulled the car over onto the gravel shoulder, my hands shaking. I needed fresh air. I needed to escape the claustrophobic intimacy of these ghosts. I killed the engine, and the silence was a relief. I sat there for a long time, just breathing. My eyes scanned the simple, primitive dashboard, the glove compartment. I don't know why I opened it. Maybe I was just looking for a distraction. Inside, beneath a stack of old gas receipts and a tire pressure gauge, was a small, leather-bound journal. It was my grandfather's. His name was embossed in faded gold on the cover. With trembling fingers, I opened it. The pages were filled with his neat, looping handwriting. The first few entries were about the car, about his love for driving. Then, the entries started to be about this road. October 12, 1971, started my rite of passage today, a state highway that cuts through the old forest. The map calls it Route 9, but it feels older than that. There's a strange quality to the air here. The radio keeps picking up old signals, like echoes. I must be coming back this way. October 15th, 1971. It's not echoes, it's the road. I've started calling it the Hollow. It holds on to things, voices, moments. I passed the old Miller farm today and heard old man Miller yelling at his son, clear as day. Miller's been dead 20 years. This road, it remembers. I flipped through the pages. The entries became more frequent, more obsessive. He was driving the road regularly, listening, cataloguing the memories he found. He was as fascinated as I had been. But then, the tone of the final entries changed. The neat cursive became a frantic, almost illegible scrawl. September 3rd, 1992, I was wrong. I was a fool. The road doesn't just play back, it records, it takes. I was out here last week after a terrible fight with my wife. I was so angry, so full of rage. Today I drove past the same spot, and I heard it. I heard myself. I heard my own words, my own anger echoing back at me from the static. It took a piece of me. It recorded my pain, and now it plays it back. Any strong emotion, any peak of human experience, it gets imprinted. It feeds the hollow. The last entry was written on a page that was tear-stained and smudged. September 5th, 1992. It's our blood. It has to be. I found the old county records, the ones they keep in the church basement. This land wasn't empty. Before it was a forest, before it was a road, it belonged to a tribe. Our ancestors, when they first settled this valley, they cleared them out. That was the phrase in the old letters, cleared them out. It wasn't a treaty, it wasn't a sale, it was a slaughter, a genocide. We built our lives on their graves. And this road cuts right through the heart of their burial ground. It's not just playing back memories, it's playing back their suffering, an endless loop of their final agony, and it's a curse for us, for our bloodline. The car, this damn car, it's an amplifier, it attunes us to their pain. This rite of passage, it isn't about connecting with us, it's about binding us to them, to their suffering. The road demands a witness from the bloodline of the usurpers. It demands we listen. I dropped the journal. My blood had turned to ice. The rite of passage, the connection to the past, it was all a lie. A beautiful romantic story to cover up a horrifying, ugly truth. I looked up, into the rearview mirror. The road behind me seemed to shimmer, the image of the forest wavering like a heat haze. The car, which had been running perfectly, suddenly sputtered, coughed. The engine died. The radio crackled to life. But it wasn't a memory this time, it was a low, expectant hum, a waiting sound, and in the mirror I saw them. Far behind me, where the road met the horizon, figures began to appear, dozens of them, then hundreds. They were on horseback, dark, wrathful silhouettes against the grey sky. They began to ride towards me, moving with an unnatural speed. They were screaming, a sound that came not through the radio but through the very air, a chorus of rage and pain, in a language I didn't know but understood perfectly. I looked to the sides of the road, to the forest I had thought was empty. It wasn't empty anymore. Figures were stumbling out from between the trees. Women, children, old men. Their bodies were torn, mutilated. Their faces were masks of unending agony, and they were all looking at me. They weren't just ghosts, they were accusations. They were raising their spectral broken hands, pointing at me, their mouths open in silent screams that I could feel in my soul. My own scream was a raw, terrified sound. I turned the key in the ignition, praying. The engine caught, roaring back to life. I stomped on the accelerator, and the old Falcon fishtailed on the gravel before finding purchase on the asphalt. I flew down that road, the army of spectral riders gaining on me in the rearview mirror, the suffering faces of the dead flashing past my windows. The road ahead seemed to stretch into infinity. The car rattled and shook, pushed to its absolute limit. The humming from the radio grew louder, more intense, a sound that felt like it was trying to shake my skull apart. I saw a sign up ahead, a modern, reflective green sign for the interstate, the end of the hollow. I shot past it, crossing some invisible line, and everything stopped. The riders in my mirror vanished. The figures in the woods were gone. The humming from the radio cut out, replaced by a profound, deafening silence. I kept driving for another mile before pulling over, my body shaking so violently I could barely control the car. I sat there, gasping for air, the silence a welcome blanket. Then the radio crackled one last time. It was a voice. An old man's voice, full of a weariness so deep it felt ancient. It was a voice I'd never heard, but I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that it was my grandfather. "Now you know," he whispered, his voice a ghost in the machine. "Now you carry it too. The road remembers. The road always remembers. And one day, son, for one of us, for one of our blood, it won't be enough to just listen. One day it will claim its payment." The radio went silent, and I was alone. But I know I'm not. I can still feel it. A cold spot in my soul. The rite of passage is complete. I've connected with my ancestors, and I'm now bound to their crime, a witness to their sin, just waiting for the day the road decides it's my turn to become another one of its recordings.